think what's in store for us. What's capitalism got up its sleeve? Wow. Oh, I mean, sometimes I just think it can't get much worse, and then it does. I think that this week there was a climate report out, that categorically said that the waves of heat waves, floods, natural disasters, catastrophe is without any reproach connected to climate change. And these extreme weather events are going to get more extreme, more frequent, and of course more devastating as well. And I think that's a good reminder about what we're up against, as well as, of course, as comrades said in the room, the constant drumbeat towards war. We've seen that this week. There's both been the G7 conference in Switzerland, and then the NATO conference is currently, I think it's starting tomorrow. Continual kind of drumbeat and acceleration of aggression towards Russia from Western forces. So that's what we're up against. I mean, probably people in this room know what we're up against, but I think it's important that we frame that when we talk about these revolutionaries from, who were born, almost 100 years ago. I think the context is very, very important. How do we avoid another Stalin? I think that has been answered in the room, through workers' organisation. We know why the revolution failed and why Stalin was able to grow and to strengthen the bureaucracy. It was through how the revolution was, starved. It was invaded by foreign armies. There was the Civil War. The working class were quite broken by all of the things that tried to destroy the revolution. And Joseph Stalin, first and second name basis this time, was able to take advantage of that and take away the means of production and put it in the hands of the state, not in the hands of workers. So I think that the answer is that we need to strengthen. I think that workers' councils and Soviets, they strengthen everything. I think they have to be central to what we talk about as socialists. I think that when I was talking about Egypt, it would have strengthened it. It would have brought soldiers onto their side in the same way that soldiers were brought on side of the workers during the Russian Revolution. I think those elements of the state, like the army, do need to be brought on side. And I think that Soviets making their own decisions can do that. I think that it's not just a nice idea that is just kind of like, it'd be nice if we all just organised and we would had a democratic kind of Soviet of workers. It's actually just it's a very practical thing as well. And I think the difference between the anarchist idea is that you don't have leaders, you don't have these kind of same sort of organisation. But what happens usually with anarchists is there is organisation and there is leaders, but they're just kind of in the shadows. So I think that, I don't think that we are asking for socialism and then moving on to a communist society. And I think always central to that is the voices of workers, and I think we need to stress that every single time. I think people in the room have basically said that. So I just want to also say that when we talk about socialism from below versus above, I don't think it has to just apply to what we say about the USSR or what we say about kind of China as well. I think it's important to talk about it a little bit. I'm the Latin America correspondent for the paper. It's important to talk about it in that context as well. You talk about there was obviously the pink wave that went on in the 2000s, and now we are seeing kind of quite a few left-wing or even who call themselves socialists leaders in Latin America who say, I'm a socialist, we're gonna have socialism in our country. You see it through there's obviously Boris now in Chile, there's Pedro Castillo in Peru. We've now been voted in. The new Colombian president is Petro, sorry, I forgot his name. You're seeing these left-wing kind of figures come in and say, Petro's not quite, he's not said he's a socialist, but saying that they can impose a better kind of system from above, and I think we have to rail against this as well. This is, most of them come from these massive explosions on the streets of so many people, like especially in Chile, around 2019, you've got these massive protests that have now kind of ended up with a new left-wing leader, but those struggles can go a lot further, and I think so. It's really important we apply them to these kind of ideas onto kind of that revolution, that wave of kind of people revolting as well. So I just kind of like wanted to say that. And then I think, and also importantly, especially with Chile, like with neoliberalism, they say that neoliberalism in Chile was kind of the first place that was like an experiment in Chile. It was like the first place to have it. And during the big protest, they always had the same kind of big chant, and it was neoliberalism was born in Chile, and it will die in Chile. And whereas, there was brilliant protests that now they have a so-called left-wing leader who will probably capitulate to the right, neoliberalism hasn't died in Chile, because we've not got a different kind of system. There's not going to be a different kind of systems entirely, despite the real anger on the streets that we saw. So I'm sorry if I'm waffling a little bit, but and I think that Martin's point about the Sudanese revolution is incredibly important and stuff, and I'm not going to really add too much to it, but I think it is revolutionary process in kind of that we can actually see with our eyes at the moment. And again, the spreading of the revolution kind of also relies on kind of the region and stuff. And I think there will be people looking on in the region, in the Middle East, and looking to Sudan for inspiration. And I think that's the thing that carries it forward, isn't it, as well? The German Revolution, of 1919, it was, looking on from the Russian Revolution, and people seeing that it's possible, and I don't think we can ever say it's easy. It's not going to be easy. I absolutely, I understand your kind of how could things spread? It's not going to be easy, is it? I think that comrades are right to say you need those revolutionary parties in each country that can guide the working class, that can kind of encourage the spread of revolution. I would say one thing that the way it cannot spread is through force, through tanks rolling into Eastern Europe. You can see that through the development of the USSR. This is not revolution from below, this is revolution, so-called revolution, spreading of socialism through force. And I think that's never how it can be. You look at what happened in Hungary in 1956, where people struck, they took control of their workplaces and set up workers' councils. This was against, the Stalinist bureaucracy. And of course, this resistance was crushed down by Russian tanks. I don't see that as socialism. I don't see that as the continuation of revolution. I see that as the continuation of a Stalinist bureaucracy of tyrants, a continuation of state capitalism. So I think that's one thing, that's the one way it cannot spread, is through force. It needs to be through workers around the world realising their own strength, realising their own power, with hopefully revolutionary parties in place already to guide them. And I'm not saying that's not a big ask, that is a big ask. It is, but I think with the cliff that we are on at the moment with the climate crisis, the cliff we are on with war and the drive to even nuclear war, I think that is the only real option that we have. I don't know if anyone else thinks there's another way out of this, but I personally think only workers' democracy and workers' power and workers taking over society would mean that we are taking back from the brink of absolute disaster and crisis. And I think that's because, when you walk down the street and you talk to someone and go, do you want the fossil fuel industry to continue, that will continue to pollute our earth, that will continue to mean more extreme weather events? Then what are they going to say? No, they're going to say no. And I think that faith in ordinary people is I think what Trotsky really brings through all of his writings. And I think my last thing I will say is that, you know, it's a big ask, as I said before, international revolution, big ask, but I think the one place that is important we start with is a revolutionary organisation, one that has these ideas about Trotsky, ones that people that can apply Marxist theory to the day that we see today. Of course, Marx never wanted his theory to be static. He wanted it to be flexible and used and kind of moulded to the situation. And I think that's why we need a revolutionary party. So if you haven't yet, I would really try and persuade you to join the Socialist Workers' Party. We're trying to be that revolutionary party, trying our best. So yeah. I'll finish there.
Thanks a lot, Sophie.